I'm always excited to talk to our guest today, Dr. Paul Hrkal. But even more so when it comes to this specific conversation, if you are looking to lose weight, trying to lose weight, and you feel like you have a harder time than most, then this conversation is for you. Today, we are talking 4 reasons why your weight might be slower to move. Not that it's not going to move, but why it might be slower to move and what you can do about it. But first, let me introduce, for those of you who aren't familiar, Dr. Hi.
Hello, how are you? Good morning, Gina.
It seems like we're having some technical issues, but let's just go with it. Are you there? Hello, can you hear me now?
I'm here. Yep, I'm here. I heard that there was a bit of like a stutter, but I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's talk about it.
Okay, let's go. 4 reasons. First of all, let's talk about how these aren't going to stop people from losing weight. You put in the time, you put in the effort. There are things that people need to do, but 4 main reasons. And this is what I learned from you after years of conversations. The first one is inflammation. So let's get right into that. How would inflammation impact someone's weight loss journey?
Well, inflammation is a signal, Gina, that the body produces when it's being damaged or there's some sort of process that is hurting the tissues. And so when that process is happening anywhere, it could be at the level of the gut, it could be at the level of your cells, it can be an autoimmune condition, then your body's not focused on losing weight. It's focused on trying to deal with that inflammation. It's like metabolic background noise. You're going to get static, and your body's the signals to help lose that fat, and optimize cellular function is just not going to be there. So the body's balance of its own homeostatic mechanisms are disrupted by inflammation. And there's, I'm sure we'll talk about this now, but there's many different types of inflammation. And that is, that is individual. And then you have to almost have like a bit of that Sherlock Holmes case of like, what is your inflammation? I have to say, like, I see a lot of people that have gone through the program, that they're current members, past members, and they come to me and they say, Dr. Paul, I think I have inflammation happening. And so what then I do is I kind of like walk them through this kind of like evaluation process based on what symptoms do they have? Do you have joint pain? Do you have gut issues? Do you, something like leaky gut, for example, which is this intestinal hyperpermeability, those cells start letting in more food particles that can cause a type of inflammation. This is well documented in the scientific literature. So there's a bit of a kind of a detective case you have to do, but then once you find it, you eliminate that, and now your body is able to adequately kind of like have the proper metabolism.
So one of the things I learned from you is inflammation is not just in the body, it's actually also in the brain as well. And we talk about the body's messaging system. This is what we're trying to do, is kind of let the body know what we want it to do, which is focus specifically on fat loss. And it's kind of just like, it's kind of like your body's in a bit of a fog. So it can't really focus specifically on the things that you want it to do, like weight loss. So how would someone know if they have inflammation?
Yeah, I'm actually really impressed that you remember the thing of the brain fog. The brain fog thing, it's worth just talking about, because when you have inflammation, it's a very kind of like vague term. A lot of people come in and say, Dr. Paul, I'm inflamed. But then after we talk about it, they actually may not be. They may have another issue. Yeah. Because there's so many different ways inflammation can be produced in the body. Like I said before, for example, if you eat certain foods and you get brain fog and you get tired, that's a sign that there's a type of inflammation happening. That's an allergic type of inflammation. Even with an allergy, there's food-mediated allergy. There's the anaphylactic one, that's obvious. But then there's this like low-grade one where, I could be eating wheat and I could be eating breads and pastries and sugars, and then I'm getting like kind of like bloated. I'm getting kind of like my joints are sore. If you wake up in the morning and your feet are really painful when they walk and there's not an obvious kind of like arthritis reason. If there's like, it's hard to get your rings on. If you feel like you're in a haze, these are all potential signs of inflammation. There are objective ways of testing it too, which is done through blood work. Unfortunately, inflammatory blood work is not really done by your family doctor unless they're really suspecting some sort of like joint pathology, like, rheumatoid arthritis, or they want to rule out lupus or something like that. But those markers could be elevated. I catch them elevated all the time.
Okay.
And oftentimes they're missed. The specialist that deals with inflammation is called a rheumatologist.
Okay.
And they are usually the referral people get if they do get some of these screening markers elevated. So that's kind of the objective thing. If you have, like I said, if you have any sort of actual swelling of joints, that is an obvious one, redness. But then most of the time, it's kind of like this subtle inflammation. And people now are starting to understand inflammation is an issue. And then at the same time, that's a double-edged sword. Then they say everything's inflammation when it's not always the case. Yeah. And then oftentimes their medical doctor might miss it because it's not like the typical autoimmune inflammation, all their markers are high. It could be this like insidious low-grade, I'll use inflammation air quotes, because it's just the signal that your body is trying to fight off something, maybe even itself.
Okay, so obviously that's a lot. So people are listening or they're watching and they're thinking, oh, maybe that's what's going on with me. That's what's going on with me. Obviously, they ideally seek out someone like yourself, a naturopathic doctor, that can help them investigate. But I do want to say that you're very, very familiar with the program. And while you are following the program and you're doing all of these things, like eating nutrient-rich foods and maybe adding in some basic supplements and managing your stress and your sleep and moving your body and doing all these healthy things for you, you should be seeing some sort of action. Yes. So if the scale isn't moving, which I do have to say at week 5 and where we're at, it is still very normal to not see any movement on the scale. In fact, we usually have this conversation a few weeks later, but we're bringing it to people earlier so they can be aware and maybe start doing something to address it earlier on. But it is still normal for the scale not to move. However, if the scale isn't moving, you should be seeing after 5 weeks some sort of non-scale victories. You should be feeling better, sleeping better, pooping better, those types of things. Would you agree?
Well, 100%. I'm again so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the first questions I ask anybody that's in the program is, what's your experience in the program? And if they say, okay, Dr. Paul, they're very focused on the weight usually. They'll say, my weight's not moving. But then I'll ask them, okay, how are you following the program, et cetera? And we always get to non-scale victories. And then they say, I'm sleeping better, my gut's better, I'm going to the bathroom more. I'm like, okay, so there's obviously positive things happening here in your metabolism. I was explaining to a person yesterday that's part of the program. Weight is a symptom, Gina. Being overweight is a symptom of a dysfunctional metabolic system. So a lot of people have to look at, I just want the weight to go. What's the root cause? And that's what we're talking about right here. And when you understand it that way, you are better able to manage and understand. It's like, if I have a headache, I want to find out what the cause of that headache is, instead of just being like, no, I want to block the headache and burn the weight. That's why, all these things like Ozempic and Rybelsus are a limiting proposition, because you're going to have to be on that for the rest of your life. And it's not actually getting at the root cause.
Yeah, I just love what you just said. My goodness, weight loss is the symptom, because I haven't had a client in 30 years that was overweight because they're eating donuts all day. Like, that person doesn't exist anymore. It's usually stress, lack of sleep, all those things. Probably a lot of the things that we're talking about now, which I'm sure stress and the way we live our lives these days emphasizes. Every time I've had someone who, and this is why I have such faith, people just keep working towards, and we'll talk about a timeline for addressing it. I'm sure it's very individual. But, whenever I worked with individual clients and their weight isn't moving and nothing is happening, I'm like, you've got to go check this out. It could be inflammation. It could be this. 9 times out of 10, it's always inflammation. Then they're just like, no, I'm doing it. It's not that. It's not that. And then they finally go get it checked out and they're like, oh, guess what? And I'm like, yeah. Right. So they go see you, you investigate, you figure out, they're dealing with some sort of inflammation. What's the timeline that someone what's the timeline when following the program that someone should give themselves to address? Like, how long is it going to take to address this inflammation so they can fucking start losing weight already?
Assuming it's inflammation as being the main issue.
Okay.
We'll talk about a bunch of other reasons shortly. But then, it's a matter of like, what can you do to address that inflammation? Is this now like, for example, an autoimmune condition? Now that's a lifelong journey that a person has to be on. That's like I'm going to use the word worst case scenario, or like the biggest issue. It could also be that, you're eating a food that your body just doesn't agree with, and you've been thinking that that's a healthy thing. For example, I do a lot of food sensitivity testing and investigations, and sometimes a person might be sensitive to a healthy food like eggs or almonds, 2 super common food allergens. Even though they're healthy for a lot of people, they have a lot of good protein, et cetera, there are some people that they eat that and it's causing inflammatory burden on their body. So once they eliminate that, all of a sudden, boom, that's when it starts happening. So Gina, it totally depends on when you identify that issue, what is the type of inflammation, address it, and then go forward. I've seen people turn around in a month. I've seen people have to deal with it for years. So there's a lot of variance to the timeline of improvement. But I think the important thing to consider here is that you're on your own timeline. I cannot tell you how many people are so frustrated by, oh, my friend, they lost 40 pounds and, oh, I'm so pissed off by this program. And, I'm like, at the same time, it's so motivating to see that. And I hope people look at the glass half full of being like, this is what it could be. But that may not be your journey right now. And a lot of people have to not get so focused on the fact that they're not doing what their X, Y, and Z friend is doing right now. And so if you need that extra support of identifying what that might be, go and work with your naturopathic doctor. And sometimes, yesterday I sent a person, go work with a psychologist. This is the area that you need your help on. So I think you need to take if you're listening to this right now and you are struggling to lose weight and you're frustrated, don't keep banging your head against the wall and trying to do the same thing and expecting different results. Like I'm talking to the people that have done the program 3 or 4 times and they've lost 5 pounds and but they love you and they love it. And they're like, I want to keep doing it because they have all these other benefits. You're getting all those benefits, but then you have to take an honest look of like, what other areas am I not willing to actually tackle? Gina?
Yeah, because some people are really resistant to work with healthcare providers. They just think that they should know what to do, or they're doing this, it can't be that, or they're the denial or whatever. Meanwhile, they're like hobbling around, or they're, feeling off. They're like, I'm fine. You've got to investigate, because with the program, people are doing so much. You have got to be seeing or feeling some kind of change. Okay, just to go over inflammation, hormonal issues like insulin resistance, Hashimoto's, high cortisol levels, digestive issues, food sensitivities, which we're going to talk about next, autoimmune diseases like arthritis, lupus, medications, stress, lifestyle and environmental factors could all be causes of inflammation. We also talk about in our notes about, triggers and foods that can contribute to inflammation, which we're also going to talk about. We're going to talk about the gut as well. So there are things that people can do to help with inflammation.
Sure.
Is that medications? Is it lifestyle? What is it?
It's definitely not medication. So you're not going to solve this by taking an Advil because even though it's an anti-inflammatory, it does one particular pathway and it blocks it. We have to think of inflammation as this like symphony, except it's out of tune and it's not playing in obviously you don't get a song. So we can't go in and just shut down the music and break all the instruments. That's kind of what an anti-inflammatory drug does, is that it helps you in the short term, but the research is so clear is it makes your lining more permeable, which in the long run ends up giving you more inflammation that's systemic. So we don't want the Band-Aid solution. We want to identify what is the cause of inflammation, go after that. The first step, 100%, I would say, is take a good look at foods that you're eating. Are you eating, first of all, are you eating on plan? Are you following everything? Again, had a conversation yesterday with a person. They were lost weight initially, but then they started traveling and they were kind of on plan. Their diet was good, but then they had these like little times that they just had these alcohol binges throughout. And then every time they did that, whoop, up went the weight, and then up went the weight. So I know that's a really like, you want to enjoy your, wherever you are in life, but that might be for that person a key indicator of instigator inflammation. So it could be alcohol, it could be gluten, it could be wheat. Now I know on the program, you don't say, I want you to eliminate anything, but this is where this conversation comes in, where it's like, you might have something that you are sensitive to. So that's going to take a little bit of trial and error. You could test it. You could go get a blood test. that tells you if you're sensitive. Again, it's not a perfect test. I know some people feel like that's inaccurate, but I do feel like in my experience that it does show a good place for you to start. So that's number one. So identify the things you're putting in your body. Sometimes maybe a good thing may actually be a negative thing. So identify food sensitivities. And that brings us right into the gut. So if you have any gut issues, if you have any changes in stools, if you're gassy and bloated, if you're getting reflux, that's a sign that you're probably eating something that is causing those things. So
can you say that again? Can you say that again? Because I know a lot of people this thing that
if you have any signs and symptoms that are gut related, for example, if you're gassy and bloated, if you're crampy, if you go through periods of alternating diarrhea and constipation, despite being on the program, despite having all those fruits and vegetables and that fiber, then that's a sign that most likely your gut microbiome, the bacteria and the lining of your gut is not happy. So that's where you start having to investigate. Are there foods you're sensitive to? Are there things that maybe are in balance in your digestive system? So that's actually a term called dysbiosis. It's something that's over and above a food sensitivity, Gina. It's not the exact same, but it's the second thing a person would look at. If you've cleaned up your diet and you really are following it, you identified some food sensitivities and you have still gut issues, then maybe this is the next thing that you look at.
So, and then again, so the things we're going to talk about, food sensitivities, gut dysbiosis and hormones, they all kind of lead into inflammation. Yeah.
They do. Yeah. And that's why I mean, I love this conversation because it's not like we're talking about 4 different things. We're actually talking about 4 overlapping things that have a lot to interact with each other. Maybe the hormonal piece would be the one that's the most removed out of all this, but it's still related to the way that your body metabolizes.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about allergies, and it's the springtime right now. My car's covered in pollen. That's another form of inflammation. So if you're constantly sneezing, eyes are watering, runny nose, itching, chronic skin conditions, that's a type of inflammation. Now, is that causing not limiting your weight loss? It could be. And so we need to identify possibly what are the triggers of that. Is it just environmental? I'll tell you a little secret for all the allergy sufferers out there. Your body, especially your liver and your immune system, has to metabolize all the things that it is exposed to. If your liver is not working as well, and the liver's job is to process and filter every drop of blood and every food that you eat, if it's congested because it's being burdened by something that you're eating that you shouldn't, then your environmental allergies get worse. So there's a connection between your gut and your environmental allergies. So what we do in naturopathic medicine is that when we clean up your body's elimination systems, the lymphatic system, the kidney, and the liver, then all of a sudden your allergies start to get relieved because you have less congestion on your highways in your body.
This is such a huge it's such a huge conversation. I mean, like actually, like it's ginormous because just the conversation of inflammation, it's just like it's so many things in combination. So here's what I just want to kind of put it in perspective for people. So you're doing a lot on the program, and that's sort of like address it 101. Like at the bare minimum, the program is going to help you with these things. And so then if you are doing all the things and you are not seeing the movement on the scale, or you're feeling any of the things that you're talking about today, this is where you want to do that investigation. You want to go deeper. You want to take it to the next level. You need to think like, what is it that is going on? So, but on the most basic level, the program and all the things you're doing on it are going to help address it. It's just, we know that you want to lose weight sooner rather than later. So what can you do to fast track it? And this is where if you do have any issues with inflammation, obviously, like, cutting out those refined carbohydrates and sugars, minimizing your alcohol, your processed meats, your trans fats and stuff like that. So this is where we're going to talk about food sensitivities, gut dysbiosis, and hormones. So food sensitivities, is that like I am eating the eggs and they are causing me to be bloated?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It is as simple as you're eating foods that you might think are healthy and they're just not for you. So I'll use myself as an example. Back in medical school, I ran testing and I found that food sensitivity my food sensitivity was dairy products and eggs. And there was a skin rash I had that didn't go away. I think I've shared this story before. Yeah. And until I removed those eggs, the skin rash hasn't come back since that time. Now, eggs are something that as an athlete, I ate a ton of because it's great protein. It's a great way to start the day. This is not to say that eggs are bad for everyone. Now, this is the future of medicine. It's personalized. Like a lot of people are probably listening saying, okay, well, maybe I can't afford to see a naturopathic doctor or work with a nutritionist, or I understand that. I totally get that. The first place you start here, everybody, is you start with those 20 questions that you have, like, why can't you lose weight? Start there. And I'm going to really say this, and I hope I don't offend anyone. You have to really be honest with yourself.
Yes.
You really have to be honest with yourself. You can't just, oh yeah, I know I'm doing all that. What are the areas in your life that you will say, well, where do you make excuses?
Yeah.
I don't have time. Boom, bingo. So that's an area that you probably are going to have to look at. Well, how do I free up my time so I don't make that excuse more? Yeah. The other thing I'm going to say, and this is a little pearl that I share with my patients only, so everyone's getting a sneak peek here, is that I really encourage everyone to take a look at their weight loss history.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is go back to your childhood and your teens and your 20s and 30s. This is a question I ask all my patients. And I say, what was your body composition at the time? What did you try to do? And sometimes we tried a lot of crazy things, yo-yo diets that unfortunately messed our metabolism up. Yeah. But what I'm thinking about here for everybody is that if we're talking about obstacles, this is the whole topic for today. Your obstacle may be a mindset that you started because of what your mother was telling you in your teens. Yeah. So, I mean, like this could be an obstacle. There's a habit that might have started at certain times. Also look at, what were you able to lose weight before? When a lot of people had in their mind, they're like, when I was at this age, what were you doing? Well, I was exercising more. Well, you're not exercising now. You lost weight before. What's the difference there? Well, maybe you need to think about actually having that component along with a Gina Livy program. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to look at our whole history as our weight and also those obstacles and really be honest with ourselves. Like, okay, where do I need to focus on and what don't I actually want to give up? That's another thing.
Well, giving up is hard because, so many people are like, oh, I think I shouldn't eat gluten. And then they take it out for the weekend and they're like, yeah, I didn't notice a difference. Or, do you know what I mean? Or to your point, you could take out gluten, but then you also have a dairy sensitivity at the same time. So, people go in to get those tests. It seems like everyone comes back with the same thing with the nuts, with the egg. Is that because we're just human and most of us do have gut issues to some extent? So the same things bother us? Is that... And like, if you took something out, right, you think it's gluten, because I hear this all the time. How long do I take it out for? Like, really?
Yeah, there's a elimination reintroduction method where you take out all the top, foods, and those top foods are like soy, gluten, dairy, certain nuts and seeds, sugar, coffee, chocolate. You take out all the fun foods, basically, and then you reintroduce them one at a time. The challenge always is, Gina, is that the foods that come back on these food sensitivity tests are the ones that we usually are staples as part of our diet. But unfortunately, they're also the most processed and refined. And they're the ones that have been changed from their natural structure. What I loved right away about your program, I think it's like 4 or 5 years ago when we started working together, is that you really advocated for whole foods. Yeah. You talked about I just want people to eat the least processed. Like, how does it come out of the ground? How does it come out of the animal? Don't change it from that as minimally as possible. And that, I think, is the nature of a lot of these food sensitivities. They're in everything. Like anybody that's actually tried to cut out dairy, soy, or gluten, they'll tell you, wow, I didn't realize it's in this sauce, it's in this protein powder. It's in everything that you're eating. And then now your immune system starts getting haywire and having an inappropriate reaction to basically bastardized food proteins. Yeah. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of the repeat offenders, I think. So then there's some proteins that are just more allergenic in nature. You'll never see a food sensitivity to beef in food sensitivities because it's just the proteins are not most proteins are not sensitive there. So yes, I think that that's a long-winded way of saying that you have to be personalized, and you have to also do it for a period of time, at least for 3 weeks. And you can't say, well, I cut it out, I only do it on weekends. No, 100% it's got to go out of the diet, and then your immune system needs a break from it.
Because doesn't it also have like a delayed reaction? Like, for example, I'm allergic to corn and I can have it, but then 3 days later, my hands start breaking out in these blisters. So if you take it out just on the weekend, it's not like you're just going to feel it that weekend, right?
100%. Yeah. So that's exactly the type of reaction, food sensitivities we're talking about. It's easy to identify, like I eat a peach and my tongue gets fuzzy. Like that's obvious because it happens right away. But we're talking about these food sensitivities that are delayed in nature. And you might, like you said, you might eat something and then you have eczema that gets worse 24 hours later. But a lot of people are like, I don't remember what I ate 2 days ago. Like, well, I ate pizza. I was at a party. Well, yeah, of course, you ate a whole bunch of different food proteins. But once you do that, once you become super mindful about what you're eating and what the individual foods and food proteins that are part of it, then you can identify things better, and you need to have it out, I always say, at least for 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, this is why keeping a journal while you're doing the program is important, not to track calories or those things, but how you are feeling, and like having a list of what you are eating and then how you are feeling as well. Right. Like that's why and then when you're asking those 4 questions, when you're eating your foods, not just get in tune with your portions, but also how your body's responding to the foods that you are eating. Nausea, stomach pain, gas, cramps, bloating, vomiting, heartburn, diarrhea, headaches, irritability, nervousness, just some of the symptoms of food intolerances. What's the difference then with gut dysbiosis?
So that's actually now a situation where your bacteria, which we have 10 times the number of bacteria than cells in our body. So we have trillions and trillions of these bacteria. So they need to be in balance. And they actually create a lot of things, from neurotransmitters to molecules that help our brain grow. Wow. It's pretty phenomenal. Yeah. But at the same time, over the years, a person can develop an imbalance in this area. Just had a patient yesterday, got food poisoning 9 years ago, severe food poisoning. And ever since that time, her digestive system has been getting worse, and it's been really, really dysfunctional. Nausea, massive pain. And so there could be an initiating trigger of an actual bacteria that throws that balance, Gina, out of whack. And your body now is going to have a lot of symptoms. These bacteria, they produce things, as I said, in the body, which are beneficial, but they could also produce, if the not so nice ones get a root hold there, they're going to produce things that are going to cause headaches and cramping and muscle pain and fatigue and brain fog. So this is that term dysbiosis, meaning it is imbalance. Eubiosis is good balance. Dysbiosis is negative balance. And that's where you might actually need to eradicate some of these bad bacteria, eradicate some of this fungus or candida. And no, I know anyone thinking is like, not as an ND, not everyone has candida. That's like the joke. All NDs think I'm not one of those NDs, because I've tested people numerous times, and candida is not the case in every single person.
I love that you said that, because it's like everyone, I've worked with so many people over the years. My naturopath says I have candida. It's the first thing I have to address. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so then what do you do about it? You just take a probiotic, prebiotic, you're good? Like what do you do about gut dysbiosis?
The crazy part, Gina, is that a lot of people with dysbiosis actually feel worse on probiotics. So if you actually are one of the people that are like, I'm doing Gina, I've identified food sensitivities, I've eliminated that, I'm eating as clean and least processed as possible, and I still have all these gut issues, then I'm like, okay, so now we need to do a bit more investigation. So you go to your doctor, they might send you to a gastroenterologist, they might do an endoscopy, they might do a colonoscopy. Is there something anatomical going on? Then they might actually send you for a stool analysis or a stool test. Do you have a parasite? Have you traveled in the recent time, or maybe since this started? Did you have some sort of bad infection, food poisoning that might have triggered this whole thing? Food poisoning can, most people, it resolves without an issue. Some people have chronic issues that happen after, and food sensitivities that come on after that. You can have celiac disease and gluten sensitivity triggered by a bacteria or virus infection. So think about how this all started. And so that's kind of how you start addressing it. And then I try to identify what's happening. And usually this is where you need to seek help from a naturopathic doctor that works with gut issues, or a gastroenterologist, or your family doctor if they're willing to take that on.
Okay, so you're consuming lots of processed foods, sugar, artificial sweeteners, there's an interesting news advice by the WHO people who do the food, which is interesting. We got to have a conversation about that sometime. But food additives, preservatives, chemicals like pesticides on unwashed fruits and vegetables, environmental toxins, skincare products, alcohol, new medications added in, use of antibiotics that obviously affect your microbiome, parasites, poor oral hygiene. People don't think about. High levels of stress and anxiety all can be causes, or adding to issues with gut dysbiosis.
100%. Yeah. Like, for example, medication. If you're on acid blocking medication, which a lot of people are on, it is well known to also down the line further in the intestines, while it blocks the acid, it also allows the growth of some of these bad bacteria, because your acid is actually the first line of defense for you. So this is just one example. If you've been on repeated antibiotics, maybe historically you had chronic ear infections like I did when I was young, which now in hindsight I know is from a food sensitivity, dairy, but that can disrupt your microbiome. So there are ways of rebalancing things, but it's a matter of like, start with the foods, sensitivities first. No, actually before that, start with the Livy plan. Most of the time that cleans up a lot of stuff. Yeah. Then look at food sensitivities. Okay. Did you do apple cider vinegar? Is apple cider vinegar make you feel better or worse? If you take bitters and apple cider vinegar and you feel like it makes you way worse, you might actually have like some sort of active ulcer happening in your upper GI. So that would be a conversation you want to have with your doctor. Maybe it's H. pylori. Maybe it's some sort of esophagitis or gastritis. There's usually a reason for that. Are you taking Advil for your joint pain? That might be eroding the lining of your gut. Also a well-known connection to having leaky gut. That's just medications. Gina, you had an excellent list that you just listed. You and I could have a conversation for 2 hours just on each one of these things, on all the environmental things that you're consuming and exposed to, that over time, maybe if you eat non-organic foods for 30 years, it's fine. But then what about the 35th and 40th, where now there's a buildup and that you've shifted the microbiome? We don't know that, but this is the theory of like, you want to try to keep things as clean as possible, and as basically as natural as possible, which is the essence of the Livy plan, because that's what's going to set you up for success. Yeah, that H. pylori is a big one, because I dealt with stomach issues where I think I went to Bahamas in October along with stress. I think I picked up something from there, and then I ended up having to take antibiotics, and I'm looking into that. And like, a lot of people have that and then don't know because they have symptoms. And a lot of people struggle every day with symptoms and they don't even know this thing is a thing. They don't know, and it needs to be assessed. And generally speaking, H. pylori, out of all the ones, so that's an example of dysbiosis. So in case people are wondering, like, let's put a name to dysbiosis, H. pylori is an example of dysbiosis. Okay. So that's mainly in the upper GI, but you could have one in the small intestine, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, right? SIBO. Exactly. Okay. Now, even gastroenterologists are starting to get on board with SIBO and understanding that. It can respond quite well to a very specific type of antibiotic that actually doesn't get absorbed and just kills it off in the gut. And then you can do things like probiotics. But again, we're talking about obstacles that you need help and guidance. You can't manage SIBO yourself. Yeah. You can't manage H. pylori yourself. No matter how much cabbage juice and Manuka honey you drink, you're not going to actually kill it. You're going to actually have to get some help. Okay. To summarize, the program addresses a lot of these things, even by way of managing stress and getting better sleep. And I hate saying cleaning up your foods, but less processed foods and those kinds of things that you're doing. This is sort of where we're saying that if you are doing the program, you should be seeing some sort of improvement happening. You can level that up by looking at the foods that you're eating. Keep a journal. Are you having sensitivities to certain foods? Try eliminating those things. Obviously, add in things like probiotic, prebiotic, apple cider vinegar. If they are making things worse, it could be. That's right. It's actually a good little test you can do. Like, add all the things in, and if you were like, wow, that actually makes me feel better, ding, that's a good sign. That means that that's going to be helping you. But if all of a sudden you take a prebiotic and probiotic and you're like, Gina, my gut symptoms absolutely flared up. That's a red flag that there's probably some kind of dysbiosis happening.
Okay.
The same thing what I said about apple cider vinegar and bitters. Are they making it worse? Well, that tells us something. And that's where you go and have a conversation with your doctor.
And then that's that end step where you be investigated. Okay, I'm very conscious of our time. Our time is running out. I want to talk about hormones. So I think what we're going to do is just do a general overview on hormones and the issue. And then next week, I know that you're back. We're going to talk secondary supplements. Let's start off that conversation by talking about hormones. But let's get into hormones. So where do hormones fit into this conversation?
Yeah, so your hormones are your signaling molecules that at different phases of your life, they do different things, especially for women cyclically. I'm going to just dive right into that because I think that's like the big elephant in the room. If I was to create the avatar of the person that sees me from the program, they're like 50 to 55-year-old woman that is struggling with weight, and it's often connected to this time of their lives, this transitionary time.
Yeah.
But hormones are not just the ovarian hormones that stop being produced in menopause, but that is one of the main ones. And so basically in menopause, your estrogen, progesterone now start being secreted, not in a nice, balanced, regular way. Now there's like little jolts of it. So it's not like it just dives and disappears. It's like, that's what perimenopause is. There's a period of time, Gina, that they become irregular. And so a person might have, skipping their period every second month. They might notice that their hot flashes come and go and they're better for a while. But the crazy part is that a lot of people tell me their non-scale victories is that their menopausal symptoms get better after they get on the plan. So what does that tell you? That tells you diet has a massive influence on hormones. That should be like a big yay for everyone, because that tells us that's a huge way we can make this transitionary period better. Sometimes a woman has a real difficult time with menopause, and some women just cruise through and have no symptoms. And it's totally random. It is unknown why that happens. Possibly, some people that have early menopause, it could be a genetic component to it. There could be a lifestyle component to it. But I will say that usually the people that struggle the most are the ones that also have a lot of chronic stress, and their adrenal system, which is another hormonal system we'll talk about. This is the one that I think is often the smoking gun for a lot of people as being the root cause. It also produces a small amount of estrogen, progesterone after the ovaries stop working. Now it has to take over. And guess what? We've been beating our adrenal system up our whole life because we're not recovering, we're stressed out, we are overexerting and under replenishing, and all of a sudden now it has to take over. Bingo bango, you get all these symptoms. So
it's not just the fact that your hormones, it's the fact that your body's so broken down from all the things we've been doing to it, and the two are like colliding and just being like
I think one of the best takeaway points about hormones is that they're all connected. So they're all connected. So the adrenal system's connected to your reproductive system, and your adrenal system's connected to your thyroid, and thyroid's connected to your reproductive. They're all connected. I'm talking about specifically these main three hormones. I mean, insulin is almost like a separate conversation, because that's a really important one. Insulin resistance is a massive issue. Your pancreas produces insulin, and the more that we abuse it throughout our lives, the more that it becomes elevated, because it has to work harder to do the same thing at driving glucose into our cells. This is where, this is just such a fascinating conversation, Gina, because, there's these molecules called diabesogens. So diabetes and obesity mixed in with the gens. And it is this molecule that basically, this is a medical term, screws up your receptors for your glucose. And it doesn't allow insulin to lock in and do its job. So what happens is insulin has to be raised to do its job. So this is where our environment plays a role. The foods and what's put on those foods play a role. And then the foods themselves, of course.
And this is how hormones affect your energy expenditure and your metabolism.
Huge. And that's exactly what insulin and glucose have a big role to play. But then back to the adrenal system, your cortisol level is responsible for your energy levels and for your blood sugar control, especially when blood sugar is low. So insulin is when it's high. Cortisol liberates blood sugar when it's low. So if you feel like you're walking through the day and you're hangry and you cannot, you need to, and that's great about the Livy plan, is that you're eating regularly. So people that have a really stressed out adrenal system, they're getting like regular feeding.
Yeah.
If you're one of these people that like loses their mind if they skip a meal, that's a sign that your adrenal system is pretty taxed, because it normally should be able to actually keep up and metabolize glucose out of your liver to keep your brain functioning. Yeah. So adrenals play a huge role. Thyroid. We haven't talked about thyroid. Thyroid, I have to say, I have to give medical doctors props. This is the one area that is actually quite often assessed. Blood work is fairly accurate. Sometimes patients will come in and say, my TSH is on the high end, maybe over 4, just around 4. There is an ideal range to TSH, in my opinion, that is a bit tighter than maybe the labs range. And so I think that might be a sluggish thyroid. Yeah. Also running a full thyroid panel, not just TSH, but also what's your T4 doing, which is your hormone that your thyroid produces. And then the active thyroid hormone is T3. You could test that. And then finally, you mentioned Hashimoto's, Gina. It's worth mentioning that's the overlap between inflammation, autoimmunity, and hormones. You see how we're like full circle again, back to inflammation? And that, again, is an autoimmune condition. And that is a simple test, anti-TPO antibody test that your doctor can run, your naturopathic doctor can run, and you could see, is your thyroid attacking itself? Is your immune system attacking your thyroid? And that is an issue, obviously, because it affects your metabolism. If your thyroid's not working well, you're not going to be able to lose weight.
Okay, just to kind of wrap this up then, having hormonal issues, program, again, keep coming back to the program, but it is kind of like a get healthy 101 and address your shit on the most basic level. You're going through the program, you're cleaning up your foods again, just meaning no processed foods, nutrient rich foods. You are mindful of your stress, of you're getting good sleep, all of these things. You're now eliminating foods that you think are causing food sensitivities. You are addressing your gut issues. So then we are expecting maybe to see some, changes maybe in hot flashes and how you're feeling. Maybe this is, again, maybe why, menstrual cycles can become more regular. But then on top of that, what do people do? They go to their doctors, they get tested, they do what?
Yeah. So I think a good way to tie all this together is that I hope this conversation for people that are listening has given people food for thought on where to start next. If you're stuck, if you feel like the scale's not moving, we've given you 4 areas for you to think about. And even by extension, the 20 questions, go over them if you haven't already, and really be honest with yourself of being like, what area in my life is my biggest obstacle? Write down a journal, write it down, and then look at, okay, what can I improve to make this area no longer an area of weakness, but an area of strength. And so that should be your first step. You don't need anybody else to do that. And if you on that list identify like, I have chronic gut issues and I've tried to follow the Gina plan, I've put the 20 questions in place and I still have chronic gut issues. Have you tried the supplements? How have you responded to that? If positively, great. Maybe you can do it yourself just based on following that. If not, that's the time that you go and seek help. So go and see your family doctor first. And they're not receptive, which unfortunately sometimes happens, then you go see a naturopathic doctor that can help guide you through this process. Because NDs, if I was to say, what is their bread and butter? I don't know why I use bread and butter since we're talking about that. What's their zone of genius? It really is hormones and gut health. That is really what NDs are best at addressing. And this is the 2 huge areas we're talking about right now. In fact, all of them are influenced by that. So this is the kind of sequential hierarchy thought process I want people to walk away with today. Maybe you could take care of yourself by just looking at like, you know what? Those 2 bottles of wine I drink on the weekends, I don't feel good on Monday. And basically I'm like, kind of like, now, Gina, come on. It was your 50th. We'll give you a pass.
Thank you.
But in all honesty, some people can have a glass of wine and 2 glasses of wine and they feel fine. Yeah. But if you're that one person, you're like, I have a glass of wine and you know what? It takes me a day to recover because I'm feeling off, my gut issues, I have a headache, I feel stiff and achy. Well, I know you love it and I know it's the summer, but don't complain about the fact that you're feeling inflamed because that's probably what's happening. So it's like, you have to be real. I love this program because people need to be real with themselves. So I'm hoping this is a call to a really just honest look at everyone. And hopefully it's also informative being like, I didn't think that maybe my gut issues are limiting my like weight loss here.
Yeah, this is the conversation. You've been doing the basics, working the program. We've given you the 20 questions to look at other areas in your life, your stress, your sleep, your movement, those things. This is the next part of that conversation. Then you start looking into these. So moving forward, you keep saying, my weight isn't moving. This isn't happening. What do I do? This is it. You listen to this conversation, you get investigative, you be proactive, and you figure it out. Thank you. I can't with you.
Love it. No, this was an awesome conversation as always, Gina. Every time we come out of this, we're like, we got to talk about 20 other things because it's like, there's a lot of great topics here. As you know, we're both passionate about this. Yeah. I really, really want to wish everybody in the program the best of luck, especially people that are my patients that are listening. I know you guys are out there. I really hope that we come across motivational. Like I know that there's probably a lot of things that sometimes the best form of love is to calling yourself out on your own crap, and being honest with yourself. And so hopefully there's a dose of both of those things here in this conversation, which, hopefully will drive you to the next level.
On that note, we're going to go. I've added Dr. Paul's conversation to our podcast, also in the group as well. You can find him, Dr. Paul Hrkal. Thank you so much.
Gina.
Until next time.
We'll see you next week, right?
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.